You're floating in the cold vacuum of space, staring at a massive alien warship that could vaporize your entire planet with a single shot. The beings inside are laughing at you. Not with you, at you. They think you're nothing more than a clever monkey who just learned to build rockets. This was humanity's reality when we first made contact with the Galactic Federation. We thought we were reaching for the stars, but what we found was a universe that saw us as a joke. The Zephyrians with their crystal technology that could bend reality itself. The Korvaxi, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form millennia ago. The Threnody hive mind that operated as one consciousness across thousands of worlds. And then there was us, humans, soft, fragile, short-lived, creatures who still fought wars over pieces of dirt and drops of oil. When Ambassador Caney stepped off our first diplomatic shuttle onto the Federation's central station, the alien delegates didn't even try to hide their amusement. They called us hairless apes. They said we were barely past the Stone Age. Some suggested we'd make decent pets if properly trained. The Galactic Council gave us an ultimatum that day: submit to their authority, accept our place as a servant species, or face extinction. They had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours. What chance did we have? But here's the thing about humans that these ancient, wise, technologically superior beings completely missed. We don't just roll over and die. We don't accept defeat gracefully. And when you back us into a corner, when you threaten everything we hold dear, we become something else entirely. Something that would make even the darkest corners of the universe tremble. The aliens thought they knew us. They had studied our broadcasts, analyzed our technology, observed our primitive conflicts, but they only saw the surface. They missed the one thing that would change everything, the one secret weapon that had been hiding in plain sight for our entire existence as a species. What they didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment long before we even knew aliens existed. Not with weapons or technology, but with something far more dangerous. Something that would turn their entire understanding of warfare upside down. The Galactic Federation wasn't just powerful, it was ancient. Civilizations that had been exploring the cosmos when Earth was still a molten rock floating in space. The hierarchy was simple and brutal. At the top sat the Eternals, beings who had achieved immortality through technology, so advanced it seemed like magic. They controlled time itself, could rewrite the laws of physics with a thought. Below them, the architect races who built worlds and shaped galaxies like artists working with clay. The Zephyrians I mentioned earlier fell into this category, along with the Vortan Empire that had conquered entire galactic clusters. Then came the Transcendents, species like the Korvaxi, who had evolved beyond physical limitations. They existed as pure consciousness, able to inhabit any form of matter or energy they chose. Their fleets didn't need crews, because the ships themselves were alive, thinking, feeling extensions of their collective will. The middle tier belonged to the ancient builders, races that had been spacefaring for millions of years, who had built the massive trade networks and communication arrays that held the galaxy together. The Nexari fell into this group, spider-like beings whose web ships could travel between dimensions. So did the crystalline hegemony, living mineral beings who grew their technology rather than building it. Even the newest members of the Federation's ruling class had been exploring space for thousands of years. The Saurian Confederacy, with their bioships that evolved and adapted in real time during combat. The Phantom Collective, gaseous beings who could phase in and out of reality at will, making them nearly impossible to fight. And then, at the very bottom of this cosmic food chain, sat humanity. We had barely made it to our own moon when they found us. Our fastest ships took months to travel distances they covered in hours. Our weapons were chemical explosives and metal projectiles, while they wielded the power of stars themselves. Our entire military could fit inside one of their smaller research vessels. The comparison was so laughable that most Federation species didn't even consider us a threat worth noting. We were classified as a Category 1 species, the same level as plants and simple animals. The Council's records listed us somewhere between space algae and cosmic dust in terms of galactic importance. But that dismissal, that complete and utter contempt, would prove to be the biggest mistake in galactic history. What the aliens saw when they studied Earth was embarrassing by galactic standards. A species that had spent its entire existence killing each other over resources, territory, and ideas. Wars that lasted decades. Conflicts that consumed entire continents. We had invented thousands of ways to destroy each other, from sharpened sticks to weapons that could crack the planet itself. To advanced alien observers, this looked like the behavior of a primitive, savage species that hadn't learned to evolve past its aggressive instincts. They were wrong. Dead wrong. What they were actually looking at was the greatest military academy in the known universe. Every human conflict had taught us something new about warfare, about survival, about what it takes to win when everything is on the line. We had learned to fight in every environment imaginable: frozen wastelands, burning deserts, deep ocean trenches, even the vacuum of space. We had mastered every form of combat, from hand-to-hand fighting to psychological warfare. But more importantly, we had developed something the peaceful, advanced species of the galaxy had forgotten existed: the ability to think like a predator. While they had spent millennia refining their technology and expanding their consciousness, humans had spent that same time perfecting the art of war. Not the clean, honorable warfare of advanced civilizations, but the brutal, desperate, do-whatever-it-takes warfare of a species that had clawed its way to the top of a hostile world's food chain. The Federation's military doctrine was based on overwhelming technological superiority. Show up with bigger ships, better weapons and advanced shields, and the enemy would surrender. It had worked for millions of years against every species they had ever encountered. None of them had ever faced an enemy that would strap explosives to their own bodies and run straight at the biggest target they could find. None of them had dealt with a species that would poison their own water supplies rather than let invaders have them. They had never met beings who would sacrifice everything, including their own lives, their own children, their own planets, rather than accept defeat. Hidden deep in classified military bunkers across Earth, human strategists had been preparing for this day, not because they knew aliens were coming, but because it's what humans do. We prepare for the worst possible scenario, and then we prepare for something even worse than that. The aliens thought they were dealing with a primitive species. What they had actually found was a race of warriors who had turned warfare into a science and survival into an art form. The meeting was supposed to be simple. Humanity would acknowledge Galactic Federation superiority, accept our new role as a protected client species, and gradually be integrated into their civilization. Admiral Torres walked into that conference room on Lunar Station, carrying Earth surrender documents. The Federation delegates were already discussing how to divide up human resources among their member species. The Nexari wanted our oceans for their aquaculture programs. The Saurians saw potential in our genetic diversity for their breeding experiments. The crystalline hegemony was interested in our planet's mineral deposits. They talked about us like we weren't even in the room, like we were inventory being catalogued rather than sentient beings negotiating for our survival. That should have been the first warning sign. Humans don't respond well to being ignored, but the real mistake came when Counselor Vex Prime, a Korvaxi energy being who had been alive since before Earth's sun was born, decided to make an example of human weakness. Without warning, without provocation, he reached out with his consciousness and simply erased Lieutenant Jackson from existence. One moment she was standing beside Admiral Torres, the next she was gone. Not dead, gone. Wiped from reality as casually as deleting a file from a computer. Vex Prime explained to the stunned human delegation that this was how the Federation dealt with species that took too long to accept their new reality. He said Jackson's death would help motivate Earth's leaders to sign the surrender documents more quickly. He thought he was demonstrating power. What he had actually done was declare war on the single most dangerous species in the known galaxy. Admiral Torres looked at the space where Lieutenant Jackson had been standing, then looked back at the alien delegates with an expression they had never seen before on any face in any species. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something far worse. It was the look of a predator that had just decided its prey had made a fatal mistake. Torres set the surrender documents on the conference table, looked directly at Vex Prime, and spoke two words that would echo through galactic history. Two words that would redefine how the universe thought about warfare, about humanity, and about what happens when you threaten something a human being cares about. He said, "Game on." That was the moment the Galactic Federation learned why every other species on Earth had either gone extinct or learned to fear the creatures that walked upright and made tools out of everything they touched. The Federation expected Earth to respond with our most advanced technology. They anticipated seeing our best warships, our strongest weapons, our most sophisticated military tactics. What they got instead was something that broke their understanding of how civilized warfare was supposed to work. The first human fleet that engaged the Korvaxi battle group wasn't trying to win. They were trying to die. But not just die in the most destructive, psychologically damaging way possible. Captain Rivera, commanding the destroyer Defiance, didn't attempt to penetrate the Korvaxi shields or outmaneuver their superior vessels. Instead, she loaded her ship with every piece of nuclear material Earth could spare, accelerated to maximum velocity, and rammed straight into their flagship while broadcasting human music at maximum volume. The explosion didn't just destroy both ships. It created a temporary rift in space-time that swallowed half the Korvaxi fleet and left the survivors questioning everything they thought they knew about physics. But the real psychological warfare had just begun. The remaining Korvaxi tried to process what they had witnessed. In their millions of years of existence, across thousands of galactic conflicts, they had never encountered a species that weaponized suicide. They couldn't comprehend the tactical advantage of using your own destruction as an attack. That was just the opening move. When the Zephyrian crystal ships arrived to support their allies, they found human vessels that had been deliberately damaged, left drifting in space like helpless prey. The Zephyrians, being honorable warriors, moved in to rescue what they assumed were human survivors. Instead, they found ships crewed by humans who had volunteered for one-way missions, vessels loaded with experimental weapons that turned the Zephyrians' own crystal technology against them. The humans had learned to hack reality-bending crystals by breaking them with hammers and studying the fragments. It was crude, primitive, and completely insane by galactic standards. It was also devastatingly effective. Within hours, news of these encounters spread throughout the Federation. For the first time in galactic history, advanced species were retreating from a primitive civilization, not because they were losing battles, but because they couldn't predict what humans would do next. The secret weapon wasn't a technology or a superweapon. It was humanity's complete willingness to ignore every rule of civilized warfare and do whatever it took to win, even if it meant destroying ourselves in the process. The Federation's response to these early encounters was swift and overwhelming. If humans wanted to fight dirty, they would show us what real power looked like. The Eternal Council deployed their reality-warping dreadnoughts, vessels that could rewrite the laws of physics in entire star systems. The architect races sent their world-killer ships, machines capable of dismantling planets and rebuilding them as weapons. It should have been the end of human resistance in a matter of days. Instead, it became the beginning of the galaxy's first lesson in human adaptability. When the Eternals tried to use their time manipulation weapons to erase human fleets from history, they discovered that humans had already figured out how to weaponize temporal paradoxes. Commander Walsh didn't try to fight the time distortion that was meant to prevent her birth. Instead, she used it to create multiple versions of herself, each commanding identical fleets from different timelines. The Eternals found themselves fighting an enemy that grew stronger every time they tried to erase it. The architect races learned similar lessons when they attempted to use their matter manipulation technology. They expected humans to be helpless against weapons that could transform space itself into killing fields. What they got instead were human engineers who had studied the captured technology for exactly 72 hours before figuring out how to reverse the polarity and turn the architect's own ships into scrap metal. The breaking point came during the Battle of Kepler 442, when the entire Phantom Collective materialized to personally end what they saw as an annoying pest problem. Beings of pure energy who could phase in and out of reality at will, the Phantoms were literally untouchable by conventional weapons. They had never lost a battle because they had never faced an enemy that could actually hurt them. They hadn't counted on humans figuring out how to build weapons that fired bullets made of crystallized music and explosive poetry. It sounds insane because it was insane, but it worked because humans had stopped trying to fight by galactic rules and started fighting by human rules instead. The Phantom Collective's perfect battle record ended when Private Chen shot their leader with a rifle that fired weaponized hope and killed him with a bullet made of compressed human stubbornness. By the time the Federation Council realized what was happening, it was too late. They weren't just losing battles to a primitive species, they were losing their sanity trying to understand how human tactics could even work. The galaxy's most advanced military minds were having nervous breakdowns, trying to develop countermeasures for weapons that shouldn't exist and tactics that defied logic itself. 6 months after that first disastrous meeting on Lunar Station, Ambassador Torres walked back into the Federation Council chambers. But this time, he wasn't carrying surrender documents. The alien delegates who had once laughed at humanity now watched him with expressions that ranged from wary respect to barely controlled terror. The Korvaxi counselor who had replaced Vex Prime kept his consciousness carefully shielded, afraid that even thinking too loudly might provoke another human response. The mighty Federation fleet that had once numbered in the millions had been reduced to barely 100,000 ships. Not because humans had superior technology, but because fighting humanity was like fighting a natural disaster that could learn and adapt. Every victory against human forces only made the next human attack more unpredictable and devastating. The galaxy had learned that humans didn't just refuse to accept defeat, they weaponized their own failures and came back stronger every time. Torres placed a new document on the council table, not a surrender, but a treaty. Terms for peaceful coexistence between humanity and the Galactic Federation. The aliens read conditions that would have been unthinkable just months before. Humans would be granted full Federation membership with complete autonomy over their territory. No interference in human development or culture, no exploitation of Earth's resources, and most importantly, no hostile action against any human colony or vessel. In exchange, humanity agreed to stop innovating new ways to break the fundamental laws of physics during combat. The Council signed without hesitation. They had learned that some species were better as allies than enemies, and humans were definitely at the top of that list. But the real change wasn't in the treaty terms. It was in how the galaxy saw us. The species that had once dismissed us as primitive pets now studied human military tactics in their war colleges. Our methods were considered too dangerous for most species to attempt, but they were undeniably effective. Earth became the first planet in galactic history to earn Federation membership through military action rather than technological advancement. As Torres left the council chambers for the final time, he carried with him something no human had ever possessed before, the respect of beings who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. And perhaps more importantly, he carried the knowledge that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest weapon of all. Because while the galaxy had been watching us struggle with basic space travel, humanity had been doing what humans do best. We had been preparing for war.